November 1942, the Mediterranean, a British submarine that had already been declared lost twice, whose commanding officer had been denied promotion, whose hull had absorbed depth charges that cracked her pressure frames, slips beneath a Sicilian convoy at 0200 hours. 3 Italian warships are above her, a destroyer, a torpedo boat, and a tanker displacing 11,000 tons carrying aviation fuel for Rommel's Afrika Korps. She has 4 torpedoes left. 48 hours later, all 3 Italian vessels are on the seabed. The submarine returns to Malta flying a Jolly Roger with 3 bars stitched on. Her commanding officer is still not promoted. The Admiralty does not believe the patrol report until a captured Italian naval officer confirms it under interrogation. The submarine was HMS Upholder. She had been in commission for 14 months. She would complete 24 war patrols in those 14 months. She would sink or damage 119,000 tons of Axis shipping. No other Allied submarine in any theatre achieved a comparable rate of destruction per month of service. Her commander was Lieutenant Commander Malcolm David Wanklyn. He had failed his periscope course. He had been assessed as lacking aggression. This is the story of the most successful submarine patrol in Royal Navy history, why the experts got it completely wrong, and what actually decides the outcome when one submarine hunts 3 warships in the dark. By the summer of 1941, the British position in North Africa was close to collapse. Rommel's Afrika Korps was consuming 70,000 tons of supplies a month. The convoys crossing from Italy and Sicily with a lifeline cut them, and the German advance stalled, protect them, and Egypt fell. The Admiralty sent the 10th Submarine Flotilla to Malta. Their mission was straightforward: find the convoys, sink the ships, die trying if necessary. Malta was being bombed flat. The submarines operated from a bombed-out base. They returned from patrols to find their berths destroyed. They dived to avoid raids and sat on the bottom while the island above them was reduced to rubble. The U-class submarine was not designed for this. At 540 tons submerged, she was one of the smallest operational submarines in Royal Navy service. Her design origin was deliberately modest. She had been built as a training boat, a cheap platform to teach attack procedures in coastal waters without risking fleet submarines. Consider what that meant in practice. Her maximum submerged speed was 9 knots, barely faster than a surfaced merchant ship making standard convoy speed. Her surface speed was 11.75 knots. A fleet destroyer made 36. If a U-class submarine was caught on the surface, she could not run. She could only dive and hope. Her armament was 4 21-inch torpedo tubes forward with 8 torpedoes carried. A single 3-inch gun on the casing for surface action against small targets. That was the complete offensive system. 8 torpedoes to sink as much shipping as possible, then return to Malta for more. Her operational depth limit was 200 feet. Acceptable for the North Sea training role she was designed for. In the Mediterranean, Axis anti-submarine forces routinely drove submarines to 300 feet and beyond. At those depths, U-class hulls experienced frame distortion. Welds cracked. Pressure hull integrity became a question rather than an assumption. The crew numbered 33 men. They lived in a pressure hull 195 feet long. In the Mediterranean summer, submerged compartment temperatures reached 110 degrees Fahrenheit. There was no air conditioning. Water condensed on every surface. Men worked in conditions that produced heat exhaustion within hours. Every expert assessment of the U-class concluded the same thing. She was adequate for training. She was marginal for offensive operations in defended waters. She was not the weapon to decide the North African campaign. They were measuring the wrong things entirely. If you are finding this analysis of Royal Navy submarine warfare interesting, subscribing takes a moment and helps the channel continue these investigations. What the specifications missed was the attack method that Wanklyn had developed and the 10th Flotilla had refined. The periscope approach had been the established doctrine since the First World War. A submarine approached at periscope depth. Use the periscope to track the target. calculated a firing solution, and launched. Accurate, deliberate, slow. Wanklyn rejected it for convoy attack in defended waters. His method was the high-speed submerged approach on sound alone. He used the hydrophone operator to track target bearings, calculated the convoy course and speed from bearing rate change, positioned Upholder on the predicted intercept track at depth, and fired on bearing. No periscope exposure, no detectable electromagnetic signature, no visual contact in the final minutes before firing. A destroyer's ASDIC could detect a periscope feather at 2,000 yards. It could not detect a submerged submarine not using active transmissions. Wanklyn gave them nothing to find until the torpedoes were already running. His torpedo management was equally unconventional. Standard doctrine fired salvos of 2 or 3 to ensure a hit. Wanklyn frequently fired single shots to conserve his 8 torpedo load across multiple targets. This required accuracy no training manual specified as achievable. In 14 months, his hit rate on fired torpedoes was approximately 30%. The flotilla average was 15%. The November 1942 patrol began at 01:30 hours on the 14th when Upholder sailed from Malta on her 23rd war patrol. She was operating the area designated Gulf of Hammamet off the Tunisian coast. Intelligence from Bletchley Park indicated a convoy movement south from Sicily within the patrol window. On the 19th, hydrophone contact, 3 ships, 2 warships in screen, 1 large merchant. Wanklyn held his depth at 60 feet and tracked on sound for 40 minutes. The convoy was making 8 knots on a bearing of 210 degrees. He calculated the intercept, brought Upholder around, and positioned her 800 yards ahead of the convoy track. At 03:42, he fired 2 torpedoes at the tanker from 700 yards, no periscope, bearing only. The first torpedo struck amidships, the second struck the stern. The aviation fuel detonated. The explosion was visible from the Sicilian coast 30 miles away. Both escorts immediately turned toward the detonation point and began dropping charges. Wanklyn went to 250 feet and altered course 90 degrees. 11 charges exploded in the next 12 minutes, none closer than 200 yards. The escorts then made their critical error. They prosecuted the attack position where the torpedoes had been fired. Upholder was no longer there. She was moving away at 3 knots below their effective ASDIC range, silent. At 06:15, 3 hours after the first attack, the hydrophone operator reported a second contact. 2 smaller vessels, course 180, speed 12 knots. The destroyer and torpedo boat had recovered from the attack and resumed their patrol pattern. They were 1,100 yards away when Wanklyn fired. 2 torpedoes, 2 targets, both hit. The destroyer Libeccio sank in 4 minutes. The torpedo boat Mosto sank in 11. Wanklyn put Upholder on the bottom of the Gulf of Hammamet in 210 feet of water and waited 9 hours before surfacing. The patrol report that reached Malta described the sinking of 1 11,000-ton tanker, 1 turbine-class destroyer, and 1 Spiker-class torpedo boat. The senior officer submarines initially returned it for verification. 3 warships in a single submerged engagement from a training submarine crewed by 33 men using 7 of 8 available torpedoes. The confirmation came 6 weeks later from Italian naval records captured at Tobruk. Every word of the patrol report was accurate. The strategic effect was immediate. The loss of the Libeccio was the 4th destroyer. The 10th flotilla had sunk in 3 months. Italian convoy commanders began demanding heavier escorts, which meant fewer destroyers available for offensive operations, which meant reduced pressure on Malta, which meant the submarines could operate with greater freedom. The economics were catastrophic for the Axis. Each turbine-class destroyer cost approximately 45 million lire to build and required 200 men to crew. HMS Upholder cost £250,000 to build and carried 33 men. She sank 3 warships worth more than her own construction cost 20 times over in a single night. By the spring of 1942, Upholder had completed her 24th patrol. She had sunk or damaged 119,000 tons of shipping. She had sunk 1 U-boat, 1 destroyer, 2 torpedo boats, and a submarine. Wanklyn had been awarded the Victoria Cross, the first given to a Royal Navy submarine commander in the Second World War. The citation noted that his many brilliant successes have been due to his daring and skill. Those words were accurate but insufficient. On April 14, 1942, Upholder sailed from Malta on her 25th patrol. She never returned. German records confirmed after the war that she was sunk on April 14th by the torpedo boat Pegaso off Tripoli. There were no survivors from her crew of 32. She had been in service for 14 months. The Royal Navy named no warship after Wanklyn for 40 years. The submarine base at Gosport eventually received the name HMS Dolphin. There is a memorial in Portsmouth Cathedral. A photograph in the Submarine Museum at Gosport shows him at the periscope. He looks younger than the patrol record suggests he should. The comparison with other submarine records makes the achievement plain. The most successful German U-boat of the entire war, Otto Kretschmer's U-99, required 19 months to sink 274,000 tons before capture. Wanklyn sank 119,000 tons in 14 months with a boat displacing 540 tons operating from a bombed base with no technical advantages over his opponents. The U-class was the wrong boat for the job by every specification. Too small, too slow, too shallow a depth limit. Designed for training, not for hunting destroyers in the defended waters off Sicily at 3 in the morning. The experts were not wrong about the specifications. They were wrong about what determined the outcome. Wanklyn had understood something that no technical assessment captured. In the dark, at depth, making no sound, with an operator tracking targets on hydrophone and a commander calculating intercepts on mental arithmetic and experience, the size of the submarine was irrelevant. What mattered was the accuracy of the solution, the timing of the shot, and the patience to wait 9 hours on the bottom after the attack before the water was safe to leave. He had been failed on his periscope course because he refused to rely on the periscope. The assessors graded what they expected to see. They could not grade what he had decided to do instead. HMS Upholder is commemorated at the Portsmouth Naval Memorial. Her battle honours are listed as Atlantic, Mediterranean 1941 and Mediterranean 1942. 3 words for 14 months and 24 patrols. The tanker carrying Rommel's aviation fuel never reached Africa. The 2 warships sent to protect the convoy never reached port. The 33 men who fired the torpedoes never came home. The 10th Flotilla's submarines sank 54% of all Axis supplies shipped to North Africa in the 8 months they operated at peak strength. Malta held. Rommel ran out of fuel. The Afrika Korps surrendered in May 1943, a training submarine, the wrong boat, the wrong commander according to the assessors who failed him on the periscope course. 119,000 tons, 24 patrols, 14 months. The record has never been broken by any Royal Navy submarine.